What does Jose Mourinho, Diego Simeone, Sean Dyche, and Jose Bordalas have in common? Well, in their back pocket, they all have a secret unholy philosophy that destroys everything we know and love about the beautiful game of football. Football pundits don't like this philosophy, but history tells us that this unholy abomination of a philosophy has saved more lives in football than any other style of play. And it just doesn't end there. What if I told you this football philosophy is so brutal, it knocked Barcelona out of the Champions League? It's so pragmatic, it took Atletico Madrid to two UEFA Champions League finals. Yet, it's also so controversial that football fans literally call it forbidden football. Today, we're going to be breaking down Haram Football and why it is still relevant in modern football today. We'll also look at how managers can use this philosophy to win impossible matches. Haram ball. The term comes from the Arabic meaning of forbidden. It is used to describe football that goes against everything we think the beautiful game should be. While most teams chase possession and pretty passing, Haram ball just says forget that. It's highly defensive, it's brutally pragmatic, and it's completely focused only on one thing: results. Haram football isn't just about defending. It's a complete philosophy built on 5 core principles: solid defensive structure, lightning counterattacks, time-wasting mastery, brutal physicality, and low possession count. We'll look at the masters of Haram football, starting with Diego Simeone, then Sean Dyche, and of course Jose Bordalas himself, and we'll use their knowledge to try and build the ultimate Haram football tactic. By the end of this video, you either love it or you absolutely hate it. First then is Diego Simeone, the man who turned defensive football into an art form. Since 2011, Simeone just hasn't coached Atletico Madrid. He's waged philosophical warfare against the football's elite, and his weapon of choice? Something called Cholismo. Cholismo is Simeone's version of Haram ball, and it starts with suffocation, and he goes all the way to even instruct his players to be very aggressive when they're trying to win the ball back from the opposition. I remember in 2013 when Atletico Madrid won the first La Liga title in 18 years, breaking the Barcelona-Real Madrid duopoly. They only conceded 26 goals that season. Their ultimate Haram moment even came at the final day in Nou Camp. Diego Godin's header from a set piece secured a point for Atleti, and it finished 1-1. They secured the title on that day. 2 years later, Simeone faced his ultimate test, Pep Guardiola's possession-oriented Bayern Munich. Bayern had 73% possession across 2 legs, and Atletico Madrid had only 27. Guess who went all the way to the final of the Champions League? One style counter-attack again, 2 legs of pure defensive suffering. In that moment, it felt like Yano Black became a brick wall. But here's the secret: Simeone doesn't just coach his tactics, he coaches a philosophy. There's time wasting, they also crowd the referee very often. The dark arts of driving the opponents insane, always tackling and tackling as hard as possible. It's almost close to cheating, but it's not cheating. It's like a psychological warfare that bloody works. With 2 La Liga titles, a Europa League final appearance, and 2 Champions League finals, Diego Simeone has etched Atletico Madrid's name among the elite by making football look very ugly. And throughout this time, he loves every second of it. And he's not the only manager that has done the impossible. Sean Dyche has kept Burnley afloat in English football by playing a similar philosophy. Unlike Atletico Madrid, Burnley are not as aggressive and brutal on the pitch. However, Sean Dyche has been having them play these beautiful long balls to hit teams on the counter-attack. They also rely heavily on dead ball situations with defenders and midfielders who are dominant in the air to give them an advantage during set pieces. While everyone else is trying to play tiki-taka like Barcelona, Sean Dyche just said, nah mate, let's just get the win. Dyche's Burnley was pure Brexit Haram football. Rigid 4-4-2, long balls to the target man, second balls, set pieces, and making football feel like it's a contact sport. 35% possession on average, and Burnley doesn't care. Why pass the ball around when you can just take long kicks to a tall striker that can head it in or knock it down to somebody else to score a tap in? But here's where Burnley's style of play gets properly haram. Turf Moor becomes a graveyard for Premier League elite. The pitch is really small, it's really tight, the crowd get really hostile, and Sean Dyche's tactic is almost like turning the game into a rugby match. Burnley will sit deep in a low block to grind out games and often use time-wasting techniques like taking the ball to the corner flag and camping it there. There was one time against Wolves that Burnley was leading 4-0, and it was, I think, 78th minute also. They still took the ball to the corner flag and was camping it there and hoping that Wolves are going to struggle to get the ball back from them. It was insane. In January 2020, back at Old Trafford, Manchester United had to play little old Burnley. And 2-0 to the Clarets. Burnley were already ahead. From one of their goals came from set pieces, the other was from a direct ball or a counter-attack. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's attacking football at Manchester United was unable to break down Burnley's defense. 71% possession for Manchester United, 29% possession for Burnley. But the final score, Manchester United 0, Burnley's Brexit Haram Football 2. But here's what made Dyche's Haram Football really special. Burnley had the smallest budget in the Premier League. Unlike Atletico Madrid that are almost an elite club, they tend to do that well in the Champions League. Burnley don't have that kind of money. They don't have the luxury of signing talented players like the elite clubs. So they find a way to grind out games and secure narrow wins when they can. And for 7 consecutive seasons, they did this, making the big boys sweat. All the Liverpool, the Arsenal, the Chelsea, they have all struggled against Burnley at some point. And they've all been victims of Dyche's Brexit football, or his version of Haram football that I tend to call Brexit ball. Burnley are not the only club facing an impossible challenge of competing against the wealth of the elite clubs. Bordalas at Getafe has made himself the most hated manager in Europe because of his approach to destroying the elite clubs with his philosophy. If you want to see Haram ball taken to its absolute extreme, Bordalas' style of play at Getafe is a perfect example of Haram football. This isn't just a man that is going to embrace the dark arts, he kind of wrote the manual of Haram football today. It's kind of where the term really came to life after watching Getafe and Bordalas. Bordalas' Getafe have the lowest pass per defensive action in La Liga. They are a defensive team, but it's weird how they have that many small numbers for PPDA. Translation, it means that they try to tackle the opponent at any point that they get. Their objective is to stop the passing rhythm and try to get the ball back even though they're not going to use it. They have the most fouls committed, the most yellow cards. They also have the most time wasting. I don't know how that was actually measured, but somehow it actually works. Getafe doesn't really adopt a high pressing system. However, they rely on aggressive mid-block to stop the opponent's passing rhythm. They do this by relentlessly closing down opponents in midfield and tackling hard as possible to get possession back. And because Getafe are not the most tactically gifted side in La Liga, when they do recover possession of the ball, they struggle to create quality chances with it. It's psychological torture, force the mistake, win the ball back, waste time, and repeat until the opponent gets frustrated and breaks down. Getafe lost the first leg 2-1, but they went on to put on a defensive masterclass in the second leg to secure a 2-0 victory and book their place in the round of 16. Here's what really shocked me from that game. Getafe only had 37% possession across both legs. Ajax had the ball all the time, but Getafe had the result, and Bordalas was laughing throughout the entire game. Like Burnley, Getafe also struggle financially in the Liga. They're not one of the elite clubs, yet they have the fewest shots conceded this season in the league. How? Very simple. If you can't outplay the opposition, outfight them. And if you can't be pretty in pity passing, just be nasty, kick them all out of the pitch. Barcelona fans tend to call this anti-football, but Dallas calls it winning with what you've got. So what can we learn from these 3 managers about playing an unholy, ugly Haram football? 3 managers, 3 different leagues, completely different personalities, but one universal truth. So here's what makes Haram football actually work. Strip away the personalities, forget the different leagues and the drama that has gone on. Every successful Haram team follows the 5 core principles. First is space is more valuable than possession. Simeone's Atletico Madrid and Dyche's Burnley, even Bordalas' Getafe, all have less than 40% average possession in most games. You don't need the ball if you can't really do anything with it. What these teams do is get in a mid-block or a low block and tend to compress the space as much as possible to restrict the amount of space that the opponent has to break them down and score goals. If you go ahead and control the space in the defensive third, the opponent can't really get through you and then score any kind of goal. That is the core philosophy of what Haram football does. So as much as the expansive style of play tends to cut teams open and then exploit the large space, Haram football does the complete opposite. It compresses the space as much as possible to restrict the amount of chances the opponents will have. Principle number 2 is controlled aggression. Now this isn't just mindless defending. We see this with Diego Simeone's coordinated pressing waves and Bordalas' aggressive tackling that leads to low passes per defensive action in La Liga. Even Burnley's Dyche knew when to press and knew when to sit in a low block and restrict space. More often than not, the team is going to adopt less pressing intensity. This is because pressing too high can also disrupt your defensive block. However, when the opponent commits players forward or when they go into the defensive third, that is where the team starts to engage with aggression and then try to unleash the Haram tackling. So the idea here is to press with purpose, defend with intelligence, attack the mistake and not the ball possession. Principle number 3 is quality over quantity in attack. With Haram ball, the team is going to rely on lightning fast counterattacks and direct balls to target men to finish off chances. Set pieces also present an opportunity to nick a goal, especially if you've got physical dominant aerial presence across the team. Principle number 4, which is the fun part, is the dark arts. This might be the hardest part to master as it's not really something that you learn from a coaching course, but if you can't win the game tactically, you can destroy your opponent mentally. Simeone adopts the dark arts of brutal fouls, time wasting and arguing with officials, frustrating the opponents at every philosophy. Jose Bordalas' systemic fouling at Getafe also exemplifies this unholy practice. Break their rhythm, disrupt their flow, and make them think that the referee is more important in the match than just actually the match itself. You're going to find the opponent getting frustrated, hounding the referee and asking questions as to why wasn't that a foul or something like that. It just confuses their rhythm and encourages them to somehow get through the game, and rather than just them trying to win. And principle number 5, we've spoken about this early already, but you can get 3 points from dead ball situations. Set pieces are vital in Haram football. However, to get these dead ball situations, you will have to get the ball into attacking third and try to attack once in a while. That is why Haram football at its core is not an ultra defensive system. Wide create chances when corners and free kicks are basically penalties or free chances in disguise. So with the proper planning of set piece routines, they can go ahead and get the best out of Haram football by creating those chances from set pieces. So now we have the set of instructions that can act as a blueprint for our Haram football system. Let's see what happens when we put this into practice. In our final Skybet League 1 game against Exeter City, I tweaked a 4-4-1-1 tactic in my Rochdale save to apply the Haram football philosophy. Now I'll show you how Haram football saved us, but notice that we went ahead early on in the game. Playing a defensive mentality can be scary if you're only going to watch the match in key highlights. However, 20 minutes later, we did double our lead. So here's the moment that Haram football saved us. Exeter City's Wilkinson is in possession of the ball. He plays the ball to Rudy, and immediately you can see our mid-block shape limiting the space. However, Rudy does succeed to play a long ball over the top to beat the block. Fletcher latches onto it, and with 2 defenders closing him down, he overhits the pass across the 6-yard box, forcing his teammate Wood out wide. Wood plays a cutback to Rudy in the box, and his first time shot gets blocked by my no-nonsense centre-back, before Massey puts it away to safety. Despite being defensive, was still aggressive and brutal, not letting Exeter City into the game. In the second half, they got frustrated and conceded a late penalty, giving us a chance to put the game to bed. Mark Murphy stepped up and made absolutely no mistake from the spot. 3-0 it finished, and we had 43% possession all game, reducing Exeter City to only 1 shot on target. We even got one of their players, Stephen Appiah, stressed off after an hour of brutal kicking. So here's how we were able to nullify Exeter City with Haram ball. Well, I kept the formation the same, but I tweaked only a few player roles. At Rochdale, I don't have the best technical players. These guys are not aggressive and defensive in any way. They are built like Mezzalas who don't really like to get their feet dirty. Now, Haram football is not always pretty, but it's effective. The top teams hate to play against this system. It would be nice if it worked as a long-term philosophy, but as you see in real football, not many teams play like this and win league titles. Except maybe Atletico Madrid, but trust me, they only did this in games where they were not favourites to win it. In games where they were favourites, they had their normal system that they went ahead to play. Haram football is a gear you can shift to when you come up against a formidable opponent and wins in tough games. What do you think of Haram football as a philosophy? Do you like it? Or is this something you think that should be banned from football altogether?